Behind the flashy cars, epic crashes, and the fame of holding a NASCAR title, NASCAR drivers rely on tricks and cheat to win races and make history. How many of them? Most of them. NASCAR had to introduce a rule book to keep things in check, and recently, they banned one of the tricks drivers use to attain speeds on oval circuits. Why did NASCAR do that? Here's why. We can all agree that cheating happens when you break a rule, but in NASCAR, defining cheating is tricky. But there's a clause in the NASCAR rulebook regarding actions detrimental to the sport, which can mean anything. Every year, the NASCAR rulebook grows a bit thicker and grayer. All vehicles are tested for compliance at every race, and NASCAR can cancel your win if your car fails the test. For instance, at the 2019 M&M's 200 Iowa, Ross Chastain led 141 of 200 laps and swept the stages to score the win. But his truck failed post-race inspection, and NASCAR revoked his victory and declared Brett Motive winner under the newly introduced disqualification policy. But NASCAR wasn't always so strict. In the early 1990s, NASCAR teams could race in various cars. Each competing manufacturer had a distinct design and the rules permitted it. However, in the late 90s, NASCAR lowered the playing field by standardizing the body build of racing cars. As a result, the bodywork of every NASCAR Sprint Cup racing car, regardless of manufacturer, is identical, except for the paint's of course. Presently, NASCAR race cars have nothing in common with street cars. What's crazier is that even though race vehicles have the brand names Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge, and Toyota, none came from an assembly line in Detroit or Japan. For decades, mechanics, crew chiefs, drivers have attempted maneuvering around NASCAR's car restrictions. Smokey Yunick, the owner of Daytona's best damn garage in town, was a thorn in NASCAR's flesh, particularly Bill France. The engineer was an aerodynamic genius, and his techniques for making a car's body glide through the air were well ahead of their time. Since such things are no longer allowed, drivers tend to use skills and tricks to stay on top of the game. Ross Chastain, a NASCAR Cup Series driver, used a trick he learned playing a 2005 NASCAR video game to launch himself into the championship finals, even though he didn't win. The 29-year-old driver cranked his car in the fifth gear, slammed it into the wall, and passed several drivers, securing the fifth spot in the 500-lap Xfinity 500 at Martinsville Speedway. After Ross's success, it was clear that following the rules may not always bring desired results, and that there's more to racing than meets the fan's eye. As the rules get tougher, drivers get even smarter, but not all tricks are allowed in the circuit. Recently, NASCAR banned the skew trick, and if any driver is seen using it, he will be disqualified. So, what is the skewing trick, and why do drivers use it? Skew is a setup in which the driver positions the car to run at an angle. The front end appears to be pointing in a different direction than the car, ideally to the right, while the spoiler points to the left, giving the vehicle a crab walk look. Typically, the rear axle is positioned at an angle to the chassis, which allows the driver to make quick turns. Racing is won and lost by fractions of a second, and drivers rely on three crucial aerodynamic elements to cross the finish line first: drag, downforce, and drafting. Skewing is for downforce and draft. It gives the driver more downforce when turning left and gets rid of drag when going straight, making the car easy to drive and, more importantly, faster. As you may know, most NASCAR races are held on high-speed oval circuits where it's challenging to balance downforce and drag. All oval tracks, whether short tracks or super speedways, have one thing in common: they all need vehicles to make left turns. And while steep banking allowed the car to do that, less braking and shift, more were needed. On the track, drafting allows the vehicle behind the lead car to reduce drag. The air flowing over the front vehicle also flows over the windshield and top of the second car, which is great for the second vehicle and any car drafting behind it. Even the lead car in a drafting duo also benefits from the technique. The second car reduces the front car's pressure drag, which is a low-pressure weight left behind by the vehicle as it drags around the track. But the pressure drag pulls the car backwards. The two drafting vehicles can gain up to 5 miles an hour over a car turning laps alone because they'll remove the pressure drag on the lead car. Let me take you back to what Ross did at Martinsville and the physics behind that move. A physicist explained that the trick was possible due to centripetal force, a turning force. That force had nothing to do with the gear, but came solely from the tires, meaning Ross was limited by how much grip his tires had. Ross knew it would be possible for his tires to generate enough grip to pass the cars in front of him, except he could somehow increase his downforce and reduce drag. So Ross hugged the wall and slingshot his car over the top lane of the 0.526 mile short track. He used the car in front of him like a wind fairing, absorbing wind and creating a pocket of less resistance so that he could go as fast as the car ahead but with less power, reserving some of his. This would cause a power drain on the lead car. So Ross was waiting for the opportune moment at that turn. He slid into turn 3 and used that track to make him turn. That way, he could reduce the drag on his car, allowing him to turn quickly. For your information, a drag reduction of about 0.5% is a significant gain in NASCAR. Before body standardization in the NASCAR series in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Plymouth Superbird had a long pointed nose and an almost comically enormous wing on the rear to enhance the downforce and decrease drag. The aerodynamic advantage of the Superbird design became crucial as track speeds, but NASCAR officials switched up on the teams and Plymouth had to discontinue that design. The Superbird was ugly, but Plymouth dealers couldn't sell them. That goes to explain how important aerodynamics is on these tracks. To understand skewing, you'll need a little idea of physics. Downforce is a mix of aerodynamic and centrifugal force that assists a race vehicle in planting to the ground. The more downforce a car has, the more grip it has. However, more downforce equals more drag, which can reduce a car's speed. Downforce is created by the air moving over the vehicle's top, which presses it down towards the track's surface, thus increasing drag. Drag is the opposing force experienced by the car when air presses against it, coupled with the increased weight created by downforce. As a NASCAR driver, you want to reduce drag to the lowest level possible, and that is where drafting comes in. The front bumper of a NASCAR race car is very low and wide and sends moving air over the car's top rather than below. This design results in a low pressure area beneath the car and a front pressure zone on top of the vehicle. This is called negative lift and pushes down on a race car. What the driver wants is to get the most of the air to flow over the top of the vehicle to maximize downforce. The nose of the vehicle is low, and the front fenders are flared wide to push the air up and over the vehicle. As you may have guessed, the issue with this design is that it has a lot of front surface area to push through the air and more drag is generated. Balancing downforce and drag within the constraints of the NASCAR-sanctioned vehicle body is a technique that the teams must simply deal with to the best of their abilities. The drivers can make a few fine-tuning tweaks, such as alternating the angle of the rear spoiler. The higher the angle of the rear wing, the more downforce it can add to the car's back end. This is what holds the rear tire securely on the ground. A device called a splitter at the front end has a similar purpose, keeping the front wheels planted on the ground. Once the little tweaks for just the right amount of downforce has been made, the driver has a good feel for the race car. So what happens when each NASCAR Sprint Cup team has adjusted its vehicle's aerodynamics to gain an advantage of just a few hundredths of a second per lap? Wait, that is against the rules, so instead, drivers use skewing. The NASCAR Cup Series hit the track for official practice ahead of the Daytona 500 in February, and the series put new regulations in place to prevent the skew of its next-gen cars. During the training, a lot of drivers were using the trick. To viewers, the car looks like crabs and we're dumb. But NASCAR knew the motive behind that move. Late that night, NASCAR banned skewing, and the teams had to make adjustments before qualifying for the race. And because drivers were used to skewed vehicles at most, if not all, oval circuits, 2022 would be a learning experience for them.